The message came on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything. Commander Jake Morrison was drinking coffee on the bridge of the carrier, defiant when the alien transmission appeared on every screen across the planet. He set down his cup slowly, watching the strange symbols transform into English text through some unknown technology. The message was simple. The species designated human is now property of the Varathi hegemony. All resistance will result in extinction. You have 72 hours to surrender. Jake had served in the Navy for 20 years. He had seen combat, faced death, and made impossible decisions. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Aliens were real, and they wanted to make humanity their slaves. Lieutenant Amy Grant stood beside him, her face pale as she read the message again and again. She was young, only 28, but she was the best tactical officer Jake had ever worked with. Her hands gripped the console so hard her knuckles turned white. "Sir," she said quietly, "they're not bluffing. We're detecting 48 large vessels in orbit. Each one is bigger than anything we've ever built." Jake nodded slowly. He had known this moment might come someday. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. Across the world, chaos erupted. People ran through the streets. Governments held emergency meetings. Religious leaders prayed for guidance. The stock markets crashed within minutes. Fear spread like wildfire through every city on every continent. But something else spread too. Something the Varathi had never expected. Anger. In Geneva, the United Earth Council gathered in an underground bunker. Secretary General Ben Harper stood at the head of the long table, looking at the faces of leaders from every major nation. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes. But beneath the fear, he saw something else. "They expect us to surrender," Ben said, his voice calm and steady. "They have done this before. Their records show they have conquered over 200 species across this arm of the galaxy. Not one has ever refused their demands." General Lisa Warren, commander of Earth's combined military forces, stood from her seat. She was a tall woman with gray hair and cold eyes. She had fought in 3 wars and had the scars to prove it. "They've never met us," she said simply. "What's our response?" Ben looked around the table. The American president nodded. The Chinese premier nodded. The Russian president, the European chancellor, the leaders of India, Brazil, Japan, and dozens of other nations all nodded. In that moment, every old conflict, every ancient hatred, every political disagreement disappeared. Humanity was united for the first time in its history. "Our response," Ben said, "is no." The Varathi received humanity's answer with confusion. Admiral Kethrall, commander of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, read the single-word message several times. In 12,000 years, no primitive species had ever refused. They always surrendered. They always accepted their place as servants of the hegemony. "Perhaps they did not understand," his second officer suggested. "Their technology is primitive. Maybe the translation failed." Kethrall, as 4 eyes narrowed. He was tall, even by Varathi standards, with gray skin and long fingers that ended in sharp claws. He had conquered 17 worlds in his career. This small blue planet would be his 18th. "Send them a reminder of our power," he ordered. "Destroy one of their coastal cities. They will learn to obey." The order was given. The Varathi warship Eternal Dominion moved into position above the Pacific Ocean, its weapons powering up to strike the city of Tokyo. It never got the chance. Jake Morrison had been waiting. While politicians talked and people panicked, he and a handful of military commanders had been preparing. Earth's orbital defense grid was a secret known only to a few dozen people. Hidden among commercial satellites, a network of railgun platforms had been built over the past decade. They were designed to stop asteroids. Today, they would stop something far more dangerous. All platforms, target the lead vessel, Jake ordered. Fire on my command. Amy Grant watched the tactical display, her heart pounding. The alien ship was massive, at least 10 times larger than any human vessel. Its weapons were charging. In seconds, millions of people would die. Sir, she said, we don't know if our weapons can penetrate their shields. Jake's jaw tightened. Then we find out right now. Fire. 24 railgun platforms fired simultaneously. Each projectile was a simple piece of tungsten, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. No explosives. No fancy technology. Just metal and physics. The Eternal Dominion shields flickered under the assault. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one projectile found a gap in the shield harmonics. Then another. Then, a dozen more. The Varathi warship broke apart like a toy smashed by an angry child. Its debris burned across the sky, a streak of fire visible from half the planet. Inside, Admiral Kethrel had only seconds to feel something he had never experienced before. Genuine surprise. Then he died. On the bridge of the Defiant, silence fell. Amy Grant stared at the tactical display, watching the enemy vessel's signal disappear. Her hands were shaking. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. Jake Morrison watched the fireball fade into the night sky. He felt no joy, no triumph. He knew this was only the beginning. The Varathi had 47 ships remaining. They would not make the same mistake twice, but something had changed. Humanity had faced an impossible enemy and won the first battle. They had proven they could fight. And that meant everything. General Lisa Warren's voice came through the communication system, broadcast to every military unit on Earth. All forces, this is General Warren. The enemy has made their intentions clear. They want us as slaves. They want our children in chains. They want to take everything we have built, everything we have dreamed, everything we are. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard as iron. We will not let them. Today, we showed them that humanity does not kneel. Tomorrow, we show them what happens when you threaten our home. Prepare for war. Across the planet, humanity prepared. Factories that had made cars and phones switched to making weapons and ships. Scientists who had studied medicine and computers started studying alien technology. Every person, young and old, rich and poor, found a way to contribute. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant as the remaining Varathi fleet moved into attack formation. He knew the hardest battles were still ahead, but he also knew something the aliens did not. They had picked the wrong planet. Humanity had spent its entire existence fighting itself. War was in their blood, their history, their very nature. They had always been wolves pretending to be sheep. And now, for the first time, they had an enemy worthy of their true nature. The Varathi wanted slaves. They would find something very different. They would find humanity. The destruction of the Eternal Dominion sent a shockwave through the Varathi fleet. In 12,000 years of conquest, no primitive species had ever destroyed one of their warships. The idea was impossible. It simply did not happen. But the burning debris falling through Earth's atmosphere told a different story. Admiral Vothan, now in command after Kethrel's death, stared at his tactical display with all 4 eyes wide. His gray skin had turned pale, and his long fingers trembled slightly as he gripped his command chair. How? He demanded. They are primitives. They have no space fleet. How did they destroy a battle cruiser? His officers had no answer. They had studied humanity for months before the invasion. They knew humans had nuclear weapons, basic satellites, and primitive rockets. Nothing in their assessment suggested the ability to threaten a Varathi warship. Vorthan's shock quickly turned to rage. He had risen through the ranks by crushing rebellions and breaking resistance movements. He would not be humiliated by animals. "All ships, attack formation," he ordered. "Destroy their orbital platforms. Then burn their cities one by one until they beg for mercy." The Vorathi fleet moved forward, 47 warships spreading across the sky like a cloud of death. Their weapons powered up, ready to rain fire upon the planet below Dot on Earth. Humanity was ready. Captain Danny Hughes climbed into the cockpit of his fighter jet and felt a strange calm wash over him. He was 35 years old, a farm boy from Kansas who had joined the Air Force because he loved to fly. Now he was about to fight aliens in the upper atmosphere. His squadron, call sign Eagle Wing, consisted of 12 pilots. They had trained together for years, but always for wars against other humans. Today, they faced something far more dangerous. "All Eagles, this is Eagle 1, Danny said over the radio. "You know the mission. Get above the atmosphere, find gaps in their shields, and hit them hard. Stay fast, stay smart, and watch each other's backs." Lieutenant Megan Torres was Eagle 3, flying on Danny's left wing. She was 29, born in Miami, and had wanted to be an astronaut since she was 5 years old. This was not how she had imagined reaching space. "Eagle 1, I'm reading multiple enemy targets above us," she reported. "They're big, but they're moving slow." "Real slow." Danny smiled grimly. The scientists had been right. The Vorathi ships were powerful but not agile. They relied on overwhelming force, not tactics. They had never needed to adapt because no one had ever challenged them. Humanity was different. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting itself. Adaptation was survival. "All Eagles, engage at will," Danny ordered. "Let's show these things what humans can do." The fighters screamed upward, their engines pushing them past the boundaries of the atmosphere. The pilots wore special suits designed for high-altitude combat, their bodies pressed back by the incredible acceleration. Megan was the first to fire. Her missile streaked toward the nearest Vorathi cruiser, aimed at a spot the scientists had identified as a weak point in their shield systems. The explosion lit up the darkness of space. "Direct hit," she shouted. Their shields dropped for about 2 seconds after impact. "That's our window." That information spread across Earth's military networks in seconds. Every pilot, every gunner, every weapons platform received the same message. 2-second window after shield impact. Danny pushed his fighter toward a Vorathi destroyer, watching his targeting computer calculate the perfect moment. A first missile hit the shields. They flickered. He fired a second missile into the gap. The destroyer's engine section exploded, sending the massive ship spinning out of control. It crashed into another Vorathi vessel, and both ships broke apart in a ball of fire. 2 for 1, Danny said quietly. "That's how we do it." On the ground, Dr. Kevin Park worked without sleep in a bunker beneath MIT. He was 42 years old, a physicist who had spent his career studying theoretical concepts that most people found boring. Now those concepts might save humanity. The wreckage from the Eternal Dominion had provided precious samples of Vorathi technology. Kevin and his team had been studying them for hours, trying to understand how the alien systems worked. Their faster-than-light drive uses artificial gravity wells, Kevin explained to his assistant, Natalie Webb. She was a graduate student, only 24, but brilliant. They fold space around the ship, creating a shortcut through normal distances. Natalie studied the equations on her tablet. "Can we build one?" Kevin ran his hands through his messy hair. "In theory, yes. The physics is actually simpler than I expected. The Vorathi have been using the same technology for thousands of years without improving it. They got comfortable. How long do you need? To build a proper FTL drive? Months. Maybe years." Kevin paused, looking at the burning sky through a small window. "But if we cut corners and accept some risks, maybe 3 weeks." "Do it," Natalie said. "Whatever you need." Above Earth, the battle raged for 19 hours. The Vorathi fought with the fury of wounded pride, their ships unleashing devastating weapons upon the planet's defenses. 3 orbital platforms were destroyed. The city of Snowpolo was hit by a kinetic strike that broke through the defense grid, killing hundreds of thousands in seconds. But humanity did not break. They did not surrender. They fought with everything they had. Danny Hughes lost 4 pilots from his squadron. He watched their signals disappear one by one, each loss hitting him like a physical blow. These were his friends, his family. But he kept fighting, kept leading, because stopping meant death for everyone on Earth. Megan Torres flew until her weapons were empty, then returned to base, rearmed, and flew again. She lost count of how many times she made the trip. All she knew was that she had to keep going. By the time the sun rose over the Atlantic Ocean, the battle was over. The last Vorathi ships either burned in space or fled toward the outer solar system. Earth was scarred but standing. Admiral Verthan's final transmission was intercepted by human intelligence. His voice was filled with disbelief and fear. "Impossible," he said. "They were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to surrender. What are these creatures?" General Lisa Warren listened to the transmission in her command center. She typed a response personally, sending it across all frequencies. "We are humanity, and we are just getting started." The victory celebrations lasted only hours. Everyone knew this was not the end. The Vorathi hegemony was vast, spanning hundreds of star systems. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more determination. But something had changed. Humanity had proven they could fight. They had bought themselves time. And in that time, scientists like Kevin Park would work miracles. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiant, looking at the debris field where 47 alien warships had once threatened his home. Amy Grant stood beside him, exhausted but alive. "They'll be back," she said quietly. Jake nodded. "I know. But next time, we won't be waiting for them here." He turned to face her, and there was something new in his eyes. Something hard and determined. "Next time, we take the fight to them." The wolves had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Vorathi hegemony did not take their defeat lightly. Within weeks of losing their entire expeditionary fleet, they began gathering the largest armada in their 12,000-year history. 3,000 warships from every corner of their empire moved toward a staging point. 40 light years from Earth. They planned to crush humanity completely. No mercy, no survivors. Just an example for every other species in the galaxy. But humanity had other plans. Dr. Kevin Park and his team finished their faster-than-light drive in 17 days. It was rough, untested, and probably dangerous. But it worked. For the first time in history, humans could travel between the stars. The first ship equipped with the new drive was named the Endeavor. It was built in secret, hidden in an underground facility in the Nevada desert. The ship was not pretty. It was a collection of human technology and salvaged alien parts held together by determination and hope. Commander Jake Morrison was chosen to lead the mission. After his actions during the Battle of Earth, he had become a symbol of human resistance. If anyone could take the fight to the enemy, it was him. Jake walked through the Endeavor for the first time, running his hands along the metal walls. The ship was smaller than he had hoped, designed for a crew of 200. But it was fast, armed, and capable of doing what no human vessel had ever done before. Lieutenant Amy Grant followed him, a tablet in her hands displaying the ship's systems. She had requested transfer to the Endeavor the moment she heard about the mission. Jake had not argued. He needed people he could trust. "The drive is stable," Amy reported. "Dr. Park says there's about a 3% chance it might create a small black hole when we activate it. But he's pretty confident that won't happen. Jake raised an eyebrow. Pretty confident? His exact words were probably fine. Amy shrugged. I've heard worse odds. 2 days later, the Endeavour launched. It rose from the Nevada desert in the middle of the night, its engines bright against the dark sky. The crew watched Earth grow smaller through the viewports, each of them knowing they might never see their home again. Jake stood on the bridge as they reached the edge of the solar system. The moment of truth had arrived. Activate the FTL drive, he ordered. The universe folded around them. Stars stretched into lines of light. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist. Then, in a flash, they were somewhere else entirely. Amy checked her instruments with trembling hands. We're 42 light years from Earth. The drive worked. A cheer erupted through the ship. They had done it. Humanity had joined the stars, but there was no time for celebration. They had a mission: find the Varathi staging fleet and stop it before it could reach Earth. Intelligence gathered from captured Varathi databases pointed them toward the Korath Nebula. The enemy fleet was assembling there, waiting for additional reinforcements before the final attack. More importantly, they had established a massive fuel depot on the fourth moon of Korath Prime. Without that fuel, half their ships could not make the journey to Earth. Jake gathered his officers in the briefing room to discuss their options. The holographic display showed the enemy position: 3,000 warships, surrounding a moon covered with fuel storage tanks. We can't fight that fleet, Amy said bluntly. We have one ship against 3,000. Those are not good odds. We don't need to fight the fleet, Jake replied. We just need to burn their fuel. Without it, they're stuck here. We buy Earth time to build more ships, train more crews, prepare better defenses. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Endeavour would jump into the system, strike the fuel depot, and escape before the enemy could respond. Speed and surprise were their only advantages. Jake selected a boarding team for the mission. Leading them was Sergeant Rick Davis, a quiet man from Oklahoma who had never expected to see combat beyond Earth. He was 38 years old, built like a bull, and absolutely dependable. We going fast. Plant explosives on the main fuel tanks and get out, Rick told his team. No heroics. No delays. We have maybe 10 minutes before their security figures out what's happening. Corporal Jenna Woods was the team's explosives expert. She was 26, grew up in Boston, and had a gift for making things blow up. Her hands were steady as she checked her equipment. 10 minutes is plenty, she said confidently. These charges are designed to create a chain reaction. Once they go off, that whole moon is going to light up like a birthday candle. The Endeavour jumped into the Korath system at 3 a.m. local time. The enemy fleet was spread across millions of kilometers. Their sensors focused outward toward potential threats from deep space. They never expected an attack from behind. Jake held his breath as the ship approached the moon. The fuel depot was massive, covering nearly a quarter of the surface. Thousands of storage tanks gleamed in the light of the distant star. No response from the enemy fleet, Amy reported. They haven't detected us yet. Rick, you're clear to launch, Jake said. The boarding shuttle dropped from the Endeavour like a stone, racing toward the moon's surface. Rick and his team of 20 Marines sat in silence, checking their weapons one final time. They landed near the main processing facility, using the moon's low gravity to move quickly across the surface. Varathi guards patrolled the area, but they were relaxed and unprepared. This was supposed to be safe territory, far from any threat. Rick's team moved like ghosts, taking down guards silently as they advanced toward their target. Jenna worked quickly, planting charges on the largest fuel tanks while her teammates covered her position. Then, everything went. An alarm blared across the facility. Someone had spotted them. Vorathi soldiers poured out of nearby buildings, their weapons firing bursts of energy that burned through the thin atmosphere. "Contact!" Rick shouted, returning fire. "Jenna, how much time do you need?" 2 minutes. She yelled back, her hands still moving despite the chaos around her. Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Rick lost 3 Marines holding the perimeter. He took a hit to his shoulder but kept fighting, refusing to fall back. The Vorathi kept coming, wave after wave of gray-skinned soldiers who screamed in their strange language. "Charges set," Jenna finally announced. 60 seconds to detonation. Rick grabbed her arm and ran. The surviving Marines followed, racing toward their shuttle as explosions began rippling across the facility behind them. The shuttle lifted off just as the main tanks ignited. The explosion was visible from orbit. A second sun bloomed on the surface of Koroth 4, consuming everything in its path. The fuel depot, the storage tanks, the processing facilities, all of it vanished in a ball of fire. Jake watched from the Endeavor's bridge, his heart pounding. "Rick, report!" Static filled the channel for a long moment. Then Rick's voice came through, tired but alive. "We're clear, Commander." Mission accomplished. The Vorathi fleet erupted into chaos. Without fuel, 1,400 ships were stranded. Commanders screamed at each other over communications channels, trying to figure out what had happened. By the time they organized a response, the Endeavor was already gone. The remaining Vorathi ships, now outnumbered by the reinforcements they had been waiting for, had no choice but to retreat. Their grand invasion was delayed, perhaps permanently. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy through hidden communication networks. Enslaved species on 100 worlds heard the story. A primitive species had struck at the heart of the hegemony and won, for the first time in thousands of years. Slaves dared to hope. Rebellions ignited on a dozen worlds. The Telkari smashed their masters' factories. The Nethvok sabotaged military installations. The Rumi refused to work in the mines. The hegemony was burning, and humanity had lit the match. Jake Morrison looked at the stars through the Endeavor's viewport, knowing the war had just begun. But for the first time, he believed they could win. The hunt was over. Now came the reckoning. The Vorathi hegemony was dying, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. 6 months after the destruction of the fuel depot at Koroth 4, 17 of their enslaved species had risen up in open rebellion. Worlds that had served the hegemony for generations were now burning with the fires of revolution. The masters had become the hunted. Humanity did not watch from the sidelines. They led the charge. Admiral Nicole Gray commanded the Relentless, the flagship of Earth's new expeditionary fleet. She was 62 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had retired after the Third Pacific War, content to spend her remaining years growing tomatoes in her California garden. Then the Vorathi came, and she put on her uniform one last time. Her fleet consisted of 47 ships, built in secret shipyards across Earth and the Moon. Each vessel was crewed by volunteers who knew they might never return home. They fought not for glory or conquest, but for the simple right to exist. "We're receiving a transmission from the Telkari Resistance," Lieutenant Commander Scott Palmer reported. He was the fleet's intelligence officer, a former CIA analyst who had spent months building contacts among the enslaved species. "They're ready to commit their underground fleet. 300 vessels." Admiral Gray nodded slowly. The Telkari were a reptilian species who had served the Vorathi for 8,000 years. Their entire culture had been built around obedience. But something had changed when they heard about Earth's resistance. Hope, long dead, had been reborn. "And the Nethvok?" she asked. "Their infiltrators are in position at 4 major shipyards. On your signal, they'll sabotage the hegemony's repair facilities. Half their damaged ships will never fly again. The plan had taken months to coordinate. Humanity could not defeat the Varathi alone. Their fleet was too small, their resources too limited. But together with the rebellious species, they had a chance. Admiral Grey looked at the star map on her display. The Varathi homeworld, center of their empire for 12,000 years, orbited a yellow star 200 light-years from Earth. It was defended by 1,500 warships. The last great fleet of a dying empire. "Send a signal," she ordered. "All forces, prepare to attack." The Battle of Varathi Prime began at dawn, local time. Human ships jumped into the system first, their weapons already firing as they emerged from faster-than-light travel. Behind them came the Telkari fleet, 300 vessels held together by determination and hate. And throughout the system, bombs planted by Nethvok saboteurs began exploding. Captain Jake Morrison led the first wave from the bridge of the Endeavor. The ship had been rebuilt twice since the war began, its hull scarred by dozens of battles. But she was still fast, still deadly, and still flew the flag of Earth. "All ships, this is Morrison," he broadcast across the Allied fleet. "Today, we end an empire. Today, we free a galaxy. For everyone who died in chains, attack." The Varathi fleet met them with desperate fury. These were not the overconfident warriors who had demanded humanity's surrender. These were soldiers fighting for their survival, their homeland, their very existence. They knew that defeat meant the end of everything they had built. Admiral Varthan, commander of the home fleet, watched the battle unfold from his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance. He had rebuilt his reputation after the disaster at Earth, but the shame still burned inside him. This was his chance for redemption. "Concentrate fire on the human flagship," he ordered. "Kill their admiral, and the Alliance will fall apart." The Relentless shook under the assault on a dozen Varathi warships. Fires broke out on 3 decks. The shields flickered and failed. Admiral Grey gripped her command chair as the ship lurched violently. "Damage report," she shouted. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, an officer replied. "We've lost main engines. Shields are gone." Nicole Grey had faced death many times in her long career. She had always been willing to sacrifice herself for her crew, her country, her species. But not today. Today, she needed to live long enough to see victory. "All hands, abandon ship," she ordered. "Transfer command to the Endeavor." The crew evacuated in escape pods as the Relentless broke apart under continued fire. Admiral Grey was the last to leave, watching her ship die through the viewport of her escape pod. She had commanded that vessel for 18 months. It had become her home. Captain Jake Morrison brought the Endeavor alongside to pick up survivors. Amy Grant personally helped Admiral Grey onto the bridge, steadying the older woman as the ship shook from nearby explosions. "Admiral," Jake said, "I'm giving you command." Nicole Grey looked at the tactical display. The battle was chaos, thousands of ships fighting across millions of kilometers. But the tide was turning. Varathi vessels were falling faster than Allied ships. The Telkari were fighting with savage joy, finally able to strike back at their oppressors. And more rebel ships were arriving every minute, drawn by the promise of freedom. "Continue the attack," she ordered. "Focus on their command ships. Cut off the head, and the body will die." The battle raged for 18 hours. The Varathi fought with the courage of desperation, but it was not enough. Their empire had grown soft over 12,000 years. They had forgotten how to fight against enemies who would not surrender. Admiral Varthan watched his fleet crumble from the bridge of the Eternal Vengeance. Ship after ship disappeared from his tactical display. Communications were filled with screams, explosions, and silence. Everything he had worked for, everything his species had built, was being destroyed. "We will not surrender to animals," He screamed at his officers. "We are the masters. We are eternal." A human missile struck the bridge directly. The explosion was instantaneous. When the last Varathi warship surrendered, silence fell across the system. The Allied fleet had lost over 100 vessels and thousands of lives. But the hegemony's home fleet was gone. Captain Danny Hughes, now commander of the Fire-Wing Eagle's Fury, flew over the debris field in his battered fighter. He had fought in every major battle of the war. He had lost more friends than he could count. But they had won. "All ships, this is Admiral Gray," a tired voice announced over the communication channel. "The battle is over. The Varathi home fleet is destroyed. Prepare to receive their surrender." On the surface of Varathi Prime, the ruling council gathered in their underground bunker. For the first time in 12,000 years, they faced a choice their ancestors had never imagined: submit or die. High Chancellor Vethkai was the oldest of them. Nearly 300 years by human reckoning. He had ruled the hegemony for 60 years, had ordered the conquest of 17 worlds, had built monuments to his own glory. Now he sat in darkness, listening to the sounds of his empire dying. "We must surrender," he said quietly. "Our fleet is gone. Our allies have abandoned us. If we continue to fight, they will kill us all." Some of the council members protested. They spoke of honor, of legacy, of fighting to the last warrior. But Vethkai silenced them with a look. "We were wrong," he admitted. "We thought we were gods. We thought the galaxy belonged to us by right. But we were just bullies who had never faced a real challenge." He stood slowly, his old bones aching. "Send the message. We surrender." Admiral Gray received the transmission on the bridge of the Endeavor. She read it twice, making sure she understood. Then she turned to Jake Morrison, and for the first time in months, she smiled. "They're surrendering," she said. "It's over." Jake looked out at the stars, at the debris field that marked the grave of an empire. He thought of everyone they had lost. His crewmates, his friends, the billions who had died on Earth, and 100 other worlds. The cost had been terrible, but they had won. Against all odds, against an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, humanity and their allies had won. "It's not over," Jake said quietly. "It's just beginning. Now comes the hard part." Nicole Gray nodded. "Rebuilding." "Justice," Jake corrected. "Every species they enslaved deserves justice. Every crime they committed must be answered for. The Varathi will not be destroyed, but they will face what they did." The surrender ceremony would come later. The trials, the rebuilding, the creation of a new order, all of that lay ahead. But for now, in this moment, the galaxy was free. The empire had crumbled, and from its ashes, something new would rise. The surrender ceremony took place in the Grand Hall of Varathi Prime, a building that had been constructed by slave labor over 600 years. Its walls were decorated with gold and precious gems, each one taken from a conquered world. Its floors were polished stone from a dozen different planets. It was meant to show the power and glory of the hegemony. Now it would witness their defeat. Admiral Nicole Gray stood at the head of the human delegation, wearing her dress uniform for the first time since the war began. The medals on her chest represented every battle she had fought, every sacrifice she had made. But she did not feel proud. She felt tired. Beside her stood representatives of every species that had fought for freedom. The Telkari, tall and reptilian, their scales gleaming under the hall's lights. The Nethvok, small and furry, their large eyes watching everything with careful attention. The Rumi, massive beings with 4 arms and skin like stone. And a dozen others, each one free for the first time in their history. High Chancellor Vethkai approached slowly, his robes trailing on the polished floor. He had aged decades in the past few weeks. His gray skin had become pale, and his 4 eyes were dull with exhaustion. He carried the surrender documents in hands that trembled slightly. The hall was silent as he stopped before Admiral Gray. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched through broadcast cameras, witnessing the end of an era. "We accept all terms," Vethkai said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The hegemony is dissolved. Our fleets will stand down. Our prisoners will be released. We submit to the judgment of those we have wronged." Admiral Gray accepted the documents, but did not smile. This was not a moment for celebration. Too many had died. Too much had been lost. "Your species will not be enslaved," she said clearly, her words broadcast across known space. "We are not you. We do not believe that conquest gives the right to rule. But you will answer for your crimes. Every species you brutalized, every world you destroyed, every life you took, all of it will be accounted for." Vethkai lowered his head. "We understand." The trials took years. Thousands of Varathi officials were held responsible for crimes against sentient beings. Some were imprisoned. Some were exiled to barren worlds at the edge of the galaxy. A few, those responsible for the worst atrocities, faced execution. But most of the Varathi people were allowed to rebuild their society under supervision. They were not monsters, just beings who had been raised to believe they were better than everyone else. Changing that would take generations, but it was possible. The rebuilding took even longer. Worlds that had been stripped of resources needed help recovering. Species that had forgotten their own cultures needed time to remember who they were. The scars of 12,000 years of slavery would not heal quickly. Humanity led the effort. Not because they wanted to rule, but because someone had to. Captain Jake Morrison became Admiral Morrison, commander of the new Galactic Defense Fleet. His job was to protect the peace, to ensure that no species ever tried to conquer others again. It was not the life he had imagined, but it was the life the galaxy needed. Amy Grant served as his second in command, just as she had since the beginning. They had been through too much together to separate now. She had become more than a colleague. She had become family. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked one evening as they stood on the observation deck of the Endeavor. The ship had been repaired and upgraded so many times that almost nothing original remained. But it was still their home. "Miss what?" Jake replied, "Earth, the old life. Before any of this happened." Jake thought about it for a long moment. He remembered his apartment in San Diego, his morning runs along the beach, his mother's Sunday dinners. All of that seemed like another life now, lived by a different person. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I wouldn't trade this. We have a chance to build something better, something that will last for thousands of years. How many people get that opportunity?" Amy nodded slowly. "I just hope we get it right." On Earth, humanity celebrated their victory, but also mourned their losses. Memorials were built for everyone who had died in the war. The names of every soldier, every civilian, every person who had given their life was carved into stone, so that future generations would never forget. Secretary General Ben Harper retired after signing the final peace treaty. He had led humanity through its darkest hour and its greatest triumph. Now he wanted to rest. His final address to the United Earth Council was broadcast across the planet and beyond. "We have proven something today," he said, his voice older and wearier than it had been 3 years earlier. "Not just to the galaxy, but to ourselves. We are not perfect. We are not always wise. We make mistakes. We fight among ourselves. We sometimes fail to live up to our ideals. But when our children are threatened, when our freedom is challenged, when everything we love is at stake, we become something that cannot be defeated." He paused, looking at the faces of leaders from every nation. They were the same people who had set aside their differences on that terrible day when the Varathi first appeared. They had remained united ever since. They called us slaves. They expected us to kneel. They learned we were something else entirely. We are humanity, and we bow to no one. The applause lasted for a long time. In the years that followed, Earth became the center of a new galactic order. Not an empire. Humanity had seen enough of those. Instead, they helped create a federation of free species, bound together by shared sacrifice and a common dream. Dr. Kevin Park became the head of the Galactic Sciences Institute, a research station orbiting a star halfway between Earth and Varathi Prime. Scientists from 100 different species worked together, sharing knowledge that had been hidden for thousands of years. The advances they made would change civilization forever. Captain Danny Hughes trained a new generation of pilots. His students came from every corner of the Federation, some human, some Telkari, some Nethvok, and a dozen other species. He taught them everything he knew about flying, fighting, and surviving. But more importantly, he taught them what it meant to serve something greater than themselves. Sergeant Rick Davis retired to a farm on a colony world called New Oklahoma. He had seen enough war for one lifetime. Now he spent his days growing crops, raising animals, and enjoying the peace he had helped create. His grandchildren would grow up free, never knowing what it meant to live in fear. And in the endless dark between stars, human ships stood watch. They were joined by Telkari cruisers, Nethvok frigates, and vessels from every species that had fought for freedom. Together, they protected the galaxy from threats both known and unknown. They were not conquerors. They were not rulers. They were guardians. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Endeavor one final time before his retirement. The ship would continue serving under a new captain, carrying on the legacy they had built. But his journey was ending. Amy Grant stood beside him, as she always had. They looked out at the stars together, remembering everything they had been through. Think they'll be okay without us? Jake asked. Amy smiled. We taught them well. They'll be fine. Jake nodded. The galaxy was at peace. Humanity had gone from primitive farmers to galactic guardians in just a few generations. They had faced extinction and emerged stronger than ever. We did good, he said quietly. Yeah, Amy agreed. We really did. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of mystery and wonder. Somewhere out there, new challenges waited. New threats would arise. New heroes would be needed. But for now, in this moment, the galaxy was free. They had been called slaves. They had responded with fire and fury. And the galaxy would never forget the day humanity proved that some species cannot be broken. The stars belonged to everyone now. And humanity would make sure they always did. The end.